Skipping cold and flu season is Plan A. But if you do get sick, be prepared for Plan B with Kleenex lotion tissues. Kleenex lotion tissues moisturize skin, helping prevent the added discomfort of red, irritated skin on top of your cold and flu symptoms. So this cold and flu season, grab Kleenex lotion tissues. Visit Kleenex.com to learn more and buy now. For whatever happens next, grab Kleenex.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy, comfy. I'm cozy, cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. Blisters. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
FunBelt Podcast.
It's just a great conference that is at a point right now where they're, I think, clearly the best group of 5 conference in the country.
The state of Sunbelt football is the strongest in our history.
And we got to continue to showcase what our league's about.
Episode 21 of the FunBelt Podcast back at you. The king has fallen, guys. Coastal Carolina. Number 14 Coastal Carolina lost to the Mountaineers last week, and that's bigger than who's joining me on the podcast tonight. But as always, it's Jeremy Harper, Hellraiser.com, Ben Moore from PantherTalk.com. How goes, guys? Remember, the king has fallen.
Have they fallen, or are they just wounded? Are they just waiting in the shadows?
Yeah, I think they've fallen, and they actually played a team. We had been talking about it, obviously, for the last few weeks, about how I believe they were paper tigers, and their schedule certainly was more than comfortable the last few weeks. And App State pretty much dominated that entire second half. The score is not really indicative, I believe, of the actual game. If you broke it down and actually watched the game itself, App State fumbled twice going in basically from the Coastal 10-yard line. So that score could have been at least 2, maybe even 3 scores beat down there in the rock, as they call it up there in Boone. But an enormous victory for App State, and their first win over a ranked opponent since that famed 2007 win at Michigan, which
oh God. Please don't mention that Michigan win again. Oh God, I can't take it.
Grayson McCall, again, he had a great game. The one play stands out in my mind. He had a perfect over the shoulder, right into the breadbasket pass.
Yeah.
291 yards. The Peoples were back. 2 touchdowns for Cameron Peoples. I thought the biggest storyline, though, actually came out after the game with Teddy Gallagher's tweet to Bryce Chase.
That was a direct message, believe it or not. Yes, he was trashing him for going to App State, and basically, as we know, the transfer portal, it was hot, and Jeremy has mentioned it a couple times, right, on our Fair podcast, talking specifically about, hey, which Chase Bryce was App State going to get? Was he going to get the Clemson guy, or was he going to get the guy who struggled mightily at Duke? And so far, he's showing, I think, this year. He's learned some things from that fella Trevor Lawrence, who just happened to go number 1 overall in the draft.
Well, definitely, the Appalachian State did get the good Chase Bryce Tuesday. Was it Tuesday night or Wednesday night?
It was a Wednesday night game.
Oh, Wednesday night football. That's right. God, it seems like it's 1,000 years ago. I do have a slightly different take on that. One, congratulations to Appalachian State, who rebounded from getting throttled by the Cajuns. We have to remember that they did not look good against the Cajuns coming into this game. So Appalachian State does get to go back to Boone, which is historically just a tough place to win. So I do feel like Coastal Carolina is still a great team. I don't think they are the paper tiger that some people say they are, Ben Moore. But it was a great win for Appalachian State. I think it was actually a good win for the Sun Belt too, in some ways, in that it showed there's a lot of diversity with the teams coming in.
Yeah, and then Thursday night, well, rewinding one more time to that Coastal Carolina game, Last week on the podcast, I even said the key to this game is what App State are we getting? Are we getting the one that kicked off the season against Miami or the one against Louisiana Lafayette? Because they were possibly looking ahead to this game. And I think we got the one that was the Miami one that was just looking past the Cajuns because, like I said, an East win, if you're an Eastern Division team, is a lot bigger than the Louisiana Lafayette game in the West. So it's a good preview of what the conference championship game could look like. But you got to win the division before you can get there to stake claim on that game.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting battle, right? You have all these teams specifically on the East that are all so kind of almost jumbled together. You have everybody now has a loss, and you're trying to sort things out. And as I was pleasantly reminded on Thursday, so I was texting some folks, 18 to 20-year-olds, am I right? You look at State and they go and just absolutely look terrible against Louisiana, a team that we even talked about on this podcast. Hey, they've kind of been sleepwalking to different games and haven't looked great in spots. Didn't look great this weekend. We'll certainly get into that as well. But managed to just continue to keep winning. So I think it's going to be certainly a battle into November, which we probably didn't necessarily see coming into the season, right? We thought it was going to be maybe a 3-team race, but you still have some teams that are in the mix, and crazier things can happen in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks.
4-way tie in the FunBelt East, which is pretty incredible, pretty exciting.
But in the West, on Thursday night, it was Louisiana Lafayette somehow beating the Red Wolves. And really the difference I saw, Layton Hatcher for Arkansas State, 3 touchdowns, 300 yards passing, 2 plays was the difference in that game. The 99-yard rushing touchdown for freshman Montrell Johnson and 74-yard rush for Chris Smith. That was your difference of the game.
Yeah, both those plays were preordained because the Red Wolves have been giving up those type of plays all season long. In fact, I think there have been 3 99-yard touchdowns in the last 3 weeks, and 2 of them have been given up by the Red Wolves. But the difference wasn't really Layton Hatcher. Layton Hatcher did fine behind quarterback with the 300 yards and the touchdowns. It was really the defense, aside from those 2 big plays, that really buckled down. They held the Cajuns scoreless in the first quarter, held them scoreless in the second quarter, or the fourth quarter, even though they probably could have scored at the very end. The game was actually more like a touchdown better for the Cajuns than it actually was. But it was a game that actually gave the Red Wolves a lot of confidence afterwards. They felt like finally they put up a defensive performance that wasn't just a complete embarrassment. It's the first time they didn't surrender 50 in a long time. Offensively, they made some plays that were kind of interesting that got the fans on the feet. And there wasn't a lot of fans at the game, we'll have to admit, but the people that were there were really excited about what they were seeing. So there's a sort of a renewed energy for the Red Wolves coming into this game against South Alabama.
Ben picked up a win over the Boobcats. Running back Tucker Gregg, 115 yards. Quarterback Darian Granger, 106 yards. But it was running back Jamaris Williams, 2 touchdowns. Damn it, Brady McBride, you had the lone touchdown for the Boobcats. Come on, guys.
And he looked good on that touchdown. I was all thinking about you, Thibodeau, when I was watching that. Because
represent the West. Come on.
There's the Brady McBride that Dusty likes so much. Ben, I thought that was a really just kind of a slobber knocker of a game. There was a lot of big hits and a little bit of pushing and shoving. And it was actually I only got to see the first half, but it was quite entertaining.
Yeah, it really was a homecoming at GSU, and it's one of those scenarios too where coming off that little big Louisiana romp there in Monroe, you had a week off for the Panthers. You came out, first couple possessions weren't real clean, weren't real crisp, which can sometimes happen after a bye week, right? You practice and you practice, and then you kind of take some time off, and then you want to reset the robot there. But the Panther Express, as they call it here in Atlanta, got rolling. Almost 300 yards of rushing. The Panthers are now 16th nationally in rushing yards per game. So they certainly got on track. And we just call him Jam, Dusty. The Jam Williams, just make it easy. Jamias Williams out of Grayson High School, the former 4-star signee with South Carolina, who's now playing running back But yeah, the Panthers have a formidable running attack, and they still really haven't kind of hit their peak passing the football, and that could happen as soon as this weekend. And in the rivalry game that is modern day hate in the state of Georgia, and will be fun to talk about that here shortly. I know we'll get into it in our preview segment.
If that's a close game, Ben, is it a Creek out win? No, I couldn't resist. I got a good close firsthand view though of Jake Bentley, Jalen Talbert of South Alabama. Impressive, really were.
Yeah.
They were the ones that carried South Alabama in that game and really kept it close, where they actually took a 14-point lead in the second half. But the Warhawks and freshman Chandler Rogers, just too much. 4 passing touchdowns. First time a Warhawk quarterback has had 4 or more passing touchdowns since 2017. 554 yards of total offense. Defense holds the Jags to just 89 yards of rushing. Another win, baby.
I've got 2 comments about this, Ben. Ben, I think I want you to back me up, or at least not back me up, but confirm what I'm seeing here. And what I'm seeing is a suddenly very confident and sort of low-key, cocky version of Dusty Thibodeau right here. A guy whose team has turned out to be pretty good. And he's saying, oh, yeah, the Jags, they put up a good fight. But in the end, we just managed to squeak by. But here's the thing, and here's my second point. ULM under Chandler Rogers is a juggernaut of a team. It's almost like they had the offensive coordinator's son at quarterback. He was doing okay, but maybe wasn't the guy. And now you've got the guy behind quarterback. Am I right about that, Dusty? Am I reading too much into it?
No, I think that Chandler Rogers was a deer in headlights after Rhett Rodriguez went down, but he's learned how to play D1 football in the short amount of time, having just gotten to ULM's campus back in June, July. And in addition to that, they've kind of taken a step back, dumbed down the offensive blocking schemes to allow those guys to be able to kind of get a better feel for the game. They were trying to do too much too early on, and it backfired on them. I think right now, the entire success or failures of that team is the offensive line. They move the ball when the offensive line is moving it, but with the fast up-tempo offense, if that offensive line just shits the bed for a possession, the defense doesn't catch their breath enough to be rested to be able to do it. So you kind of snowball it that way.
Thoreau says, simplify, simplify, simplify. I simplify it. I guess that's what the Warhawks have done. But I got an interesting stat for you. The Jags have given up 8 passing touchdowns this year. 4 of those, half of them, came against that ULM team on Saturday night. So that is an incredible testimony to what the Warhawks are doing against really good defensive teams like the Jaguars. So congratulations, Dusty. I approve of your newfound modesty, your fake calm as it is about how great this team has become.
Hey, if you're going to troll me, just know the invite's open November 13th. I feel like this is a wrestling promo cut. November 13th on the Bayou. And you, Jeremy.
Let's see how these Red Wolves do against the Jaguars before I commit to something so radical as to coming down to Monroe for a football game.
Yeah, I will say this. We've talked about the last 2 or 3 weeks, right? Especially the way South Alabama started. Hey, that was probably going to, you could almost pencil in right, maybe half just the South as a bowl, berth there. I don't believe that today. I don't, and I think Monroe absolutely can have that opportunity. And I think that 5th bowl slot is going to be very, very interesting to see who fights for that and who grabs it here in the next couple of weeks, because the Warhawks are doing it. We talked about it in the preseason. You have competent coaching. That's not necessarily a shot at anyone specifically, but you have an offensive mind who's coached in the Power 5. You have competent, players basically who are starting to believe. And I think it's not only, Dusty's confidence, but it's the players. You're seeing them believe and say, look, they can do the little things to win, as opposed to in the past, they did the things that just you can't do and you lose. And I think they're learning how to win and building a culture of winning. And I'm excited to see them week in and week out now, when you couldn't say that quite candidly the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and then on the opposite end of that spectrum, Dusty, you've got the Jags, who probably had ULM and Texas State penciled in as wins coming into the season. Now they're kind of struggling here. They're in some sort of must-win territory if they want to make it to bowl eligibility. So yeah, that's sort of a tale of two programs, one going up and one just sort of not only just plateauing, but sinking as well. So that's interesting that the Kane Womack era began with so much promise and now seem to hit a big road bump.
So with that said, the conference guys got a little bit better today. And we're going to talk about it more on our special episode tomorrow of the edition of Southern Miss and soon to be Marshall. But our guest tonight is a guy that knows about conference realignment. We had Commissioner Keith Gill on previously in an episode, but now we get the godfather of the Sun Belt, Karl Benson, to join us.
You know what's funny too is that it's sort of the karma has come full circle when it comes to Conference USA and the Sun Belt. When Karl Benson was running the Sun Belt back in those days, you had Conference USA just picking apart the Sun Belt for programs. And now it's Conference USA who finds itself picked apart. And you kind of wonder, are they going to respond in the same way Karl Benson did, was to play it cool, look for some good FCS programs, look for some guys with some promise, and roll that dice and see if it comes up good.
There is no way somebody can handle it as well as Karl Benson.
Of course not. He's the best.
Commish, you there?
How do I not say good afternoon to you fellas with that in mind?
Well, we made sure to tee you up with some nice compliments so that you can come in on a high.
Man alive, I always said that Ruston and Monroe and that whole Northwest Louisiana was part of my favorite place I'd ever go. Especially that golf course halfway between Ruston and Monroe.
Oh, is it nice?
Fire Creek, the best.
Yep.
Okay, I'll have to come down there and check that out. Mr. Benson, I had a big question for you.
Wait, but before you start, Jeremy,
cut the Mr. stuff before that.
when you say Mr. Benson, I'm sorry. I agree to be respectful of the commissioner, but all I can think of is the old butler when you say Mr. Benson. So it's still Commish Benson. No disrespect to Keith Gill at all.
Okay, fine. How about we just go with
KB, Commish, whatever. So yeah.
KB, Commish. Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of like in KB. KB, I was just wondering though. I remember back at the time in 2012 specifically comes to mind when Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky announced that they were leaving the conference, and they made that announcement at a really bad time. It was near the end of the football season. There are a couple teams still in play for the championship, and Middle Tennessee was one of those teams. It just seemed like a real kick in the junk to have that announcement made at that time. How did the Sun Belt Commissioner's Office, how did they feel about that at the time, and what was the key to recovering?
Well, first of all, you mentioned Middle Tennessee. They played their final football game at Arkansas State after they had announced, and I don't know if I was planning on going to that game or not, but I ended up going to that game, and I don't know the exact score, but I'm thinking it was 50-10 Arkansas State.
49-0.
And you talk about a kick in the Arkansas State kicked Middle Tennessee back to Eastern Tennessee there. So it was a fun kind of short-lived, because after that, then it was roll the sleeves up and and get to work. If you remember, if you want to kind of do the historical piece of this, I came to the Sun Belt from the WAC in about February of 2012, and I knew at that time that North Texas and Florida International and Florida Atlantic were all being courted by Conference USA. And Middle Tennessee, Western Kentucky were not really in that grouping. And when I came on board in early March, 1st of April, first thing I did was go to North Texas, go to Florida International, go to the Florida Atlantic campuses, and try to convince them that I had a plan that that might work to make the Sun Belt better. And and it included the App States and the Georgia Southerns that I was already aware of before I came to the Sun Belt. So I mean, I had a plan in place. And once Florida International, Florida Atlantic, and North Texas, left, then it was to implement that plan. And people forget Georgia State was the first school that we added, and which was a surprise. And they never went through that FCS conference. They went.
Wow.
Bill Curry was coaching, and they became an FCS conference, and maybe only played 1 year before. They then made the jump to the Sun Belt. So they were the first piece of the kind of putting the Sun Belt back together again. And Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee, as you said, made their announcement in the fall of 2012. But before that, we added Texas State, we added UT Arlington into the mix. And so I mean, it was a plan that that I was given the kind of the green light to go with, and had presidential support, and we made good on a couple of those additions for sure.
Commissioner Benson had and I can certainly verify. I've covered Georgia State since practice once. So you're talking to the guy there. I was actually at the press conference and was asking you questions there that day at the Georgia Dome. I know you had a relationship with the then athletic director and obviously the president there at Georgia State. Maybe go back just a little bit if you can in the memory banks. So how did those conversations go? You had a relationship with Cheryl Levick from your time in the WAC and her experiences there. But what were some of the factors that even you had to look at with Georgia State as it related to add to the Sun Belt?
Well, Cheryl and I did go back. Actually, first met her when she worked at the NCAA, because I was a former NCAA staff person as well, and stayed in touch with her as she went to the West Coast to Stanford and then being the AD at Santa Clara. But she may have been one of the first people that called me once I got the Sun Belt job. And I'll have to admit, at that time, Georgia State was not on my radar screen. She put it on the radar screen, had an opportunity to meet with her president, Mark Becker, who had a very, very aggressive vision. And when you look at what Georgia State has done since 2012 in terms of developing their athletics program and specifically their football program, they've gone to 2 bowl games since they started in 2014, which is 2 more bowl games than some other programs that might be out there. But they had a vision. Again, and Georgia State really didn't fit into that mold of the App State and Georgia Southern, the programs that had long historical former national champions at the FCS level, smaller communities but really rapid fan bases. Georgia State was a brand new program in a top 10 market in the country, playing in the dome at that time. But so they didn't fit. But it was a matter of who was available within the footprint, and you've probably heard, all of you guys have heard that we talked about how do we build the footprint, and depending on how far west they wanted to go, and they wanted to stay in Texas, and knowing that Texas was going to be the western border, how to kind of create 2 divisions with knowing that we were going to go to the eastern shores of Georgia as well. So it was a fun time. It was an energetic time. I was 60 years old when I made the decision to leave the WAC and come to the Sun Belt, and I told him at that time that I would work 5 to 7 years, and hope that within that time that that we could put it together. I ended up staying for 7 years, and think that we left the Sun Belt in a pretty good spot back in 2019.
Commissioner, what's the one school when you were looking at doing expansion that you feel maybe got away from you? Like, you're like, God, we really needed that school.
Well, my relationship with Dan Renault at Louisiana Tech, Dusty, was the one that.
You're killing me.
Well, I know, especially looking at it today and what's going on today. But I brought Louisiana Tech into the WAC in 1999, and developed really a great friendship with all the people in Ruston. And when I said that, Ruston really was one of the best places that I traveled to in the WAC, and one of the reasons that they really wanted in the WAC. And so I felt like I had some insight. I knew the Davison family, well, and had established friendships there, and knew how important they were to the Louisiana Tech program. But when I first made contact with President Renault, he was very interested in talking to me about what the plan was. And I recall to this day, he was on his way to College Station, Texas for some conference at Texas A&M. And I flew into Houston and drove to College Station and met with President Renault there, and tried to convince him, persuade him that the Sun Belt was going to be a better landing spot for Louisiana Tech than Conference USA. And as much as he said, as much as I'd love to to have you as my commissioner again, I just don't think it's going to work based on the kind of the politics in Northwest Louisiana. And they end up. How do you like that for a diplomatic answer right there? Without getting specific, and without even mentioning one of the other, and it wasn't Grambling, you guys know that. So but anyway, so that's one that I wish could have happened. UT San Antonio was in the same boat. I brought UT San Antonio into the WAC, and so those were probably the first two schools that I tried to. They were the first two that I targeted. And we talked about this, and now it's pretty. Schools want to. There are some schools that don't want to be in the same conference with other schools, and I had experienced before, so it didn't surprise me. But in this case, Louisiana Tech did not want to be in the same conference with ULM, and we don't need to get into specifics. North Texas didn't want to be in the same conference. North Texas didn't want to be in the same conference with Texas State. And one of the reasons that Texas State, that we took so long to add Texas State, was because North Texas was kind of waiting out there to make their decision whether to go to Conference USA or stay in the Sun Belt. And be honest, straightforward, North Texas says, if we're staying in the Sun Belt, we won't stay in the Sun Belt if Texas State is in your plan. And so, they kind of held up the Texas State piece. We added UT Arlington before we added Texas State. But so, those are some of the dynamics that that I think we were faced with. But looking back on it, we overcame some of those no's, and and then proceeded to build out. The New Mexico State Idaho additions, the football only was a short-term plan, and it was a plan to make sure that we could establish ourselves as an FBS conference, and knowing that we were bringing in FCS, Georgia State, App State, Georgia Southern, that needed to get through the cycle before they could be full FBS members. We needed New Mexico State and Idaho to qualify as an FBS to get additional money from the CFP. And I'm not on the the Christmas card list in Moscow, Idaho, or Las Cruces.
I'm not either, sadly.
Sure. And yet I had a lot of good friends there that that were with me when I was at the WAC, and and to be honest, we gave them a lifeline for the 3 years that they were in the Sun Belt. But probably one of the smartest things that, and I can't say that I did it, but I remember the day that I was presenting Idaho and New Mexico State as football only members to the Sun Belt membership, to the presidents and chancellors. And the president of Arkansas State at that time just asked a pretty routine question. He said, well, is this forever? Is this in perpetuity? And I said, probably not, but we've never, there's never been documents that have been written that said that there's a look-in when you add a school, that there's a look-in in 3 years, that either the school or the conference could execute. And so the fact that there was language in the agreement that gave the Sun Belt the opportunity, but it also gave Idaho and New Mexico State an opportunity that if the Mountain West had come to them and asked them to join, they could have left without any penalty. And so it was a two-way agreement, and that allowed us to get out from under the Idaho and New Mexico State membership and that footprint deal. And then it came down to who was going to be the 12th member after Western Kentucky left. And those that were on the board were Coastal Carolina, Eastern Kentucky, and New Mexico State as a full member. And so, New Mexico State people not only, got kind of shoved out once, then we left them out again. So they again have not been real pleased with, with my decisions on that. But, I think the Coastal Carolina, addition was one that probably surprised us that they have come as far as they did in such a short time, especially on the football side. But little side note on Coastal Carolina, all this is in my book, guys. It hasn't been written yet, but
I was like, you got a book?
So, but when Coastal Carolina was making their run in Omaha for the College World Series, their departure from the Big South was pretty. It wasn't the friendliest of departures, and their entry into the Sun Belt was July 1, 2015. And as they get to Omaha, there were rain delays early in the World Series. There was rain delays and continued rain delays. And finally, the last game was scheduled on June 30th. And they had to move that game up to like noon because there was big forecast for thunderstorms that evening that would have forced the game to be played on July 1, which would have made Coastal Carolina an actual member of the Sun Belt had that game been postponed. And there was a little bit of joke involved, but the president of Coastal Carolina, told me that he says if this game is moved to July 1, we're slapping those Sun Belt logos on the Coastal Carolina uniform. But probably was a good thing that it didn't happen. That might have rubbed it in a little bit too much. So
did you do the rain dance though, just trying to make it happen?
Yeah, it would have been fun. That would have been a fun deal. I had again when you think of some of the cool things that I've been able to do in my career. I was on the infield in Omaha twice as the WAC commissioner with national champions. Rice in 2002 or so, and then when Fresno State started it in Ruston. They came back and to the losers bracket in the WAC tournament, hosted Louisiana Tech, and they got the bats rolling, and they won the WAC tournament and got in as a 4 seed in the West, and I think beat Fullerton and beat Long Beach and advanced, and that was cool. That was a really fun couple of weeks. I made the drive from Denver to Omaha 3 times. There were no flight. All the fans. The only flights from Fresno to Omaha came through Denver, and I'm living in Denver, and there were no seats on any of the flights from Denver to Omaha, especially for the final game. And ended up driving, but fun stuff. A lot of good history, and interesting now to watch what's going on. Both in the Sun Belt and and the WAC. Really, when you think about it, never thought that the WAC would be tied into this set of possible expansions, and schools that have just joined the WAC are now being, at least speculated that they may end up making a quicker move to FBS than anybody expected. So,
well, I did have a question about you talked about some of the schools that you were trying to convince. What about the schools that were contacting you saying, hey, we are ready, and you and the membership had to basically say, maybe not, no, you're not, or maybe call us back a little bit later, almost equated to high school dating, right? You want to take somebody on a date, and you may not have mutual interest there. How does that process go? In your
Eastern
certainly,
Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky was one, Ben, that made a strong presentation. They had a new president, Mike Benson, that had just come to Eastern Kentucky from Southern Utah, and he was very impressive with his plan for Eastern Kentucky, but just didn't, at the end of the day, just didn't think that they were ready. And a little irony now is that Mike Benson is now the new president of Coastal Carolina, and in his opening remarks as president of Coastal Carolina, he reflected on his time in Eastern Kentucky and how badly he wanted to get into the Sun Belt, and figured the only way to get into the Sun Belt was to become president at an existing school. So he's a Coastal now, and I think that they're really I think well prepared, and he's going to be a real strong advocate to continue the Chanticleers. Liberty was a school that made it very public of their interest in the Sun Belt. That was probably one of those that you wished would have been kept a little quieter on both sides. That that it ended up public documents showed the amount of money that they were willing to spend to buy their way into the Sun Belt. But and same a year later they made the same overture. In fact, they doubled the money that they offered the Sun Belt to get into Conference USA, and they, my understanding, they may have made even a larger offer to the American here in the last 6 weeks to try to buy their way into the American. And they're sitting there now claiming that that the independent route is still a good route for them. But that was one that got way too much publicity than need be. James Madison was one that that we would have extended an invitation to James Madison back in 2014 to be that 12th member. Had they been willing to say yes, we were ready to extend that invitation. And there were some hurt feelings there when it was found out that I was on their campus and had perhaps made an invitation. Their president, who's the president today, that looks like is now headed to the Sun Belt, but he made it clear at that time that James Madison wasn't ready to join the Sun Belt. They would continue to look for better opportunities for him. And that there's a couple presidents probably in the Sun Belt who still remember his public statements that that they didn't appreciate. But I think the irony here in those, whether it was Eastern Kentucky or Liberty or James Madison, had those not been the ones, where would Coastal Carolina wouldn't gotten in? And,
well, we're glad.
Where would Coastal Carolina be today? So.
Well, we're glad to get Jimmy Madison on the rebound there. But I had a question for you, KB, in terms of what does this Conference USA do now? It's kind of ironic that the tables have turned so swiftly on CUSA. They came in and took a bunch of Sun Belt teams and sort of made a lot of implications that the Sun Belt will never be as good as the CUSA as a result. And now it's complete opposite. Guys like Middle Tennessee and Louisiana Tech and Western Kentucky and some of the others are sort of left stranded. What would be your advice to that conference moving forward? Is it joining forces with the WAC? Is it finding some great FBS programs? Is it taking in Liberty, even though Liberty, as Ben has often said to us, is a bit radioactive? What can CUSA do to survive?
I was in the same boat at the WAC, Jeremy, and there does come a time when your options are, you've depleted your options. I don't think that Conference USA is at that stage yet, because they have some options, whether they're good options or not, but they're pretty obvious in terms of New Mexico State and Liberty and UMass as existing FBS independents. In 2010 and 11, when I was trying to, to quote, save the WAC for another time, there really weren't any FBS members that were available. It was strictly, FCS. And once we exhausted those FCS opportunities, Montana State, Cal Davis, Sacramento State, Portland State, Eastern Washington, the, half of the Big Sky Conference. Once that happened, there were still schools left in the, in the WAC. It was New Mexico State, and Idaho and Louisiana Tech. It was just a matter of, it's impossible to go on. I'm not saying that that's where Conference USA is right now, in that they have 5, they've got a core of 5. Their footprint is expansive from El Paso to Miami, to Ruston, with, Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee right there, those two together. So they have some geography to really overcome, but they at least have pieces that they can go to. I think that there are other FCS schools, both on the, the kind of the eastern half and as well as the Southland Conference, and now the WAC, that are in their footprint. So, I mean, I think they have some FCS opportunities. And, I read today that Chris Massaro, the athletic director, longtime athletic director at Middle Tennessee, suggested that, let's just slow this thing down and take our time. And I think that that's good advice right now. And that, there's not even though there's a sense of urgency by fans and coaches and administrators at the 5 schools that are left, and that, Judy is getting just hammered with, okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right now, I think it'd be better to pause rather than make some decisions that you might not be happy with down the road. So I know it, fan bases want things done immediately, but I think the patience right now is probably in their corner.
Today was the official announcement that Southern Miss will be joining the Sunbelt Conference. In there, they talked about having 2 years of distribution that they have to pay as exit fees, basically $3 million. When you were commissioner of the Sunbelt, you received several exit fees from teams that had left. What kind of happens with that money? Is that used to entice new members? Is that just a great party that you throw? I mean, where does that money go? Actually,
the Sunbelt did not have, at that time, when I inherited the Sunbelt in 2012, there were no penalties. Sunbelt was a relatively new conference that had been formed in 2001. And they kind of put together that conference by bringing in some FCS and incorporating others. And they just never had that, that exit policy or that penalty. And we never had to work to bring in any of that. I do have an interesting story. Back in my days in the WAC, when the 8 schools left the WAC and created the Mountain West, they left behind basketball units, was what their penalty was, NCAA basketball units. And at that time, Utah had been to the Final Four. I mean, so the WAC got this bucket full of NCAA basketball units that, were in place for 6 years. And so the joke was that anytime that I'd take the athletic directors out for dinner, somebody would joke and thank one of the former WAC ADs for dinner that night. So we used, but you use that money as the reserves. Right now, as far as the Conference USA penalties, I wouldn't necessarily believe that those exit fees are what is being reported. I believe the formula calls for 2 years of revenue distribution. And so it's whatever, what was distributed back on June 30 of 2021 has already been distributed. Their next distribution cycle rolls to June of 2022. And at that point in time, those are still members. And the way that they get those fees is they don't distribute in that last year or the next to last year of their membership. And so I don't know what the financial records, of Conference USA would show as to what was last year's distribution. And again, the bucket, the revenue bucket that every conference has, is your television deal. And then it's your NCAA basketball units that you have. And then now it's your CFP revenue distribution. And those are the three primary revenue pieces that Conference USA has, the FunBelt has, the Mountain West, the MAC, the Group of Five all have those similar buckets. And how does that add up to? Does it add up to $20 million? We know that the CFP money is about 13 to 15, depending on where you fit into the Group of Five, 1 through 5. But so even if it is 20 million, divided by 14, I don't know if it gets to a total of 3 million over 2 years. But regardless, it's you put it in a reserve fund, and I've heard that maybe they are making some overtures to use that money to entice schools to to come their way. But again, it's not a it's kind of the you get that bonus for those back in the days when you used to get bonuses, those one-time payments. It's it's gone before you know it. So
Okay, Commissioner, I had a question specifically about the CFP. We talk about it a lot on this show. Talk a lot all the way about Group of Five and their chances in that. You obviously sat in the role as a Group of Five commissioner. I know you can't balance the budget. There's no revenue sharing, certainly from conference to conference. But with Cincinnati's success this season, obviously Coastal getting as high as they did before losing last week. How hard is it, I guess, from your seat and even talking to your membership group about the potential in the CFP and even with the potential expansion? Because I'm a little bit cynical when it comes to that specifically. I think it may be more seats at the table for the Power Five conferences necessarily, not necessarily for G5. So just want to get your take on that and if it is realistic for a Group of Five school to kind of break.
Well, I think this year Cincinnati certainly is in the best position that any team has ever been in at this time. I think it's going to be a week from tonight when the CFP does their first poll. Where will Cincinnati be? I'm hearing today that the speculation is that they'll be number 4, and then it's a matter of how they evaluate for the next month in terms of style points or what happens to Alabama as a one. If I'm the American commissioner, if I'm the athletic director in Cincinnati, I'm very, very leery that something's going to happen that that will cause the Cincinnati to an undefeated Cincinnati to get bounced out of that. But and again, maybe from a political standpoint, especially it being the last year that Cincinnati's in, maybe they throw them a favor as well. As far as going forward, Ben, I've got some cynic in me as well in terms of what the new CFP is going to mean. What was proposed back in June, the 12 team with that automatic 6 number. I was shocked when I saw that because it really was a message to the Group of Five that that they would truly have a spot, and it maybe was to address the Americans' Power 6 movement and their desire to kind of find their way under the big tent to get an automatic. It was interesting that as soon as that came out, one of the biggest supporters of that that guaranteed 6 spot was Mike Oresco, and that was almost hey, I got what I wanted. And now, 3 months later, the stop sign's been put up on the CFP expansion, and what is it going to entail, and whether that number 6 spot is going to continue. I would be shocked if it does. And I think that just in terms of the group of 5 and the departures of Cincinnati, Houston and UCF, what did that do to the overall value of not just the American, but the group of 5 in general? And you look at, at the history, take those 3 schools out of the picture, and where is the value in the group of 5? Boise State has, who would have thought Boise State's, went 3 and 4 here, and they've lost their last 3. Which as a Boise State alum, that's hard for me to think is possible. But has the rose kind of gone off the Boise State wagon? And then you think of, the other teams. Memphis, went to the Cotton Bowl 2 years ago and played Penn State, and Memphis is on the verge of not getting bowl eligible this year. The other teams, from the MAC, Western Michigan, Northern Illinois, have never really done anything after, those breakout years they've had. So where is the most recent CFP history for the group of 5? And, I don't think it's, this year if Cincinnati gets it, it'll be an asterisk that it really wasn't a group of 5. So I'd be surprised that the group of 5 gets that, that guaranteed access. Unless it's something along the lines of, they just throw away all the automatics and it's the top 12 teams, and just let it play out. And there'd be one way to say that everybody has access and nobody has any preferential access, and all 10 conferences have an equal chance to get into the playoff. Just wouldn't surprise me if that's one of the outcomes. So the money's going to be huge. The money's going to be huge. I was part of a negotiating team that worked on getting the current CFP formula that provides the group of 5, 22% of the media rights, approximately $90 million now. I think it would be somewhat silly to think that 22%, if this CFP, 12-team CFP goes to $2 billion, that the group of 5 is going to continue to get 22% of it. I've heard that there are Power 5 ADs that weren't around back in 2013 when that revenue sharing, arrangement was created, are asking the questions today. Now, can somebody tell me why did we do this back in 2013? And so I think there's going to be some real pressure for the Power 5 to grab as much as that revenue as they possibly can.
We wrap up with this there, Commish, and we can't thank you enough for joining us.
My pleasure, especially with that opening.
Yeah, I mean, I do what I can. With you being kind of the grandfather, the grand architect of the FunBelt Conference, do you kind of sit back and marvel and that the FunBelt has really become one of the premier G5s?
Well, I'm proud of the universities that got the FunBelt there. And one of the things that I faced when we got there was that the number of payday games, the number of Power 5 payday games in the FunBelt, it was like the average was 2.4 of the teams going forward, with ULM having 3, and there may have been one year they even had 4. But one of the scheduling strategies was to wean them off of that, those payday games. And Jack Hawkins, the longtime chancellor at Troy, was on board with my wanting to, how do we address this? And he told his colleagues one day, he says, we have become addicted to those payday games. And, they're not healthy, for our program to go out and play multiple games. And, he helped me get across this point that the perfect non-conference scheduling model was one payday game or one Power 5 game, one FBS game at home, one FCS game at home, and then two games against our peers, our group of 5 peers. And when you go back and look at the records that schools started having, the Sun Belt went from 2 bowl eligible teams to 5 or 6 bowl eligible teams, and it worked. And I think that one piece of strategy is what allowed the Sun Belt to get into bowl games, win some bowl games, bragging rights for the best bowl game percentage, best winning percentage. But go back and look at the number of teams that that were winning 6 games. Was really a marked difference, and that is what catapulted the Sun Belt in the group of 5 rankings, the revenue sharing rankings, from number 5 to number 3. And I'm assuming that this year will be the same. This will be the 4th year in a row that the Sun Belt will be in that number 3 spot. And there were a couple times, 2018 and I believe 2019, the gap between the Sun Belt and the number 2 team was closer than the gap between number 3 and number 4. So the Sun Belt was not only getting closer to the American and the Mountain West, they were separating themselves from Conference USA and the Mid-American Conference in the last 5 years. And I think that's what has been able to document that the Sun Belt truly has, achieved that status of being better than Conference USA and better than the MAC, and now it's taking advantage of that. And I mean, now you're reading, the potential to be the premier, group of 5 conference.
Right. That's your legacy, Karl.
But one last thing, and again, this is, people have asked me about, about the potential. We got App State and Georgia Southern, proved it. Coastal Carolina has proved it. You miss on some and you hit on others, but you've got to hit on some. So when these 4, assuming that it's Old Dominion and James Madison and Marshall, if you look at today, I mean, Southern Miss is 1-6 today. Old Dominion's 1-6. James Madison's having a good year. Marshall's kind of back to being, respectable. Those teams have got to produce and deliver. They can't be going less than 500, because if you bring in 4 new schools, and as long as the computer rankings continue to rank the group of 5 teams, the more teams you have, the greater chance you have of having some bad teams at the bottom. And I, my only worry about this is that the 10-team Sun Belt had fewer teams below 500 than the 14-team Conference USA or the 14-team or the 12-team Mid-American. And that's what elevated the Sun Belt in those computer rankings, which also with that comes several $1 million more in revenue by getting in that spot. So I think there's a lot of pressure right now that those teams coming into the Sun Belt have, better be, the hits and not the misses.
Commissioner Benson, thank you so much again for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, fellas.
Look forward to having you on anytime you want to join us.
Good enough. Thank you, guys. Good luck to you.
So with Commissioner Benson, a lot of his schools that he brought in will be back in action this week. Week 9 of the Sun Belt Conference getting started on Thursday. Troy looking for the upset of Coastal Carolina at Conway. I've said it all season long. Depends on what Troy's team shows up. But for the most part, I think Coastal gets past it unless they're on a pity party and the right Troy team shows up.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know who wins that game. Is it Coastal who's going to want to just to start destroying again like they did before? Or is it Troy who actually has one of the top defenses in the nation, pitted against that Coastal team that can move the ball, but when they get hit up against a bully, they stop in their tracks. I feel like Coastal wins this game, but not by the 18 that Vegas is giving them.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting part too is not only how Coastal has handled success, but how they handle adversity now. This is the first time that these players and coaches, quite honestly, have had a loss, have that week. They've had to stew onto it. Ultimately, they need to look at themselves in a lot of ways. They did not run the football well at all. They got dominated on both lines of scrimmage against App State. You just mentioned it. Troy has a very, very salty defense, really good front seven and secondary. Did they see something on the App State film? Can they take a look at it and take advantage? They may or may not have as good athletes there in all three layers there of the defense, but it's that line popped out. It kind of made me pause and say, will Coastal feel sorry for themselves, or will they rally and pull off a win?
Raging Cajuns not happy about it, but they have the 11 a.m. game against Jeremy's Boobcats. Damn it, McBride. Don't break my heart again. Get the dub. I think the Cajuns roll.
Yeah, I think Brady McBride is a wonderful story for the Bobcats, but he's not going to be a wonderful story on Saturday. I think the Cajuns take care of that business pretty handedly. The Bobcats just haven't played 4 great quarters. I haven't seen 4 good quarters from the Bobcats in a while. I'm a little disappointed in them. I thought they'd be a better team this year. They're not. Cajuns much more complete. It's going to be one of those games where they just sort of lazily get the one win.
Yeah, I think I agree with that sentiment. I think McBride is as slippery as he can be, and I did see him make some really, really nice throws. He's got certainly a high quality arm, and I think they have some pieces, but just a lot going on. They do dumb stuff, penalties. They had one of basically their defensive linemen flat out punch one of the Georgia State offensive linemen, and for whatever reason, it was giving offsetting penalties. Thought Sean Elliott was going to have an aneurysm right there on the sidelines, for not ejecting that individual. But a lot of just dumb stuff, penalties and things like that. And against Louisiana, we know Levi Lewis did not have a good game last week. I expect for him to bounce back and the Cajuns to roll.
Warhawks travel to Boone, the site of the big upset last week. I like the Warhawks on the spread. 28 points is a lot to cover, but I can see the Warhawks not faring well on the road, something that they haven't won away from Malone Stadium yet. So I don't know if they get the win, but I would pick them to cover.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're starting, like we talked about a little bit earlier, they're learning how to win, that they're learning how to piece things together, piece quarters together, series and things like that. Definitely watching the film. I think it's a close game, and it's one of those scenarios too where could we see the Warhawks, with another big, kind of eye-raising win? It's possible, and then it would, be just one more win to get bowl eligibility. So it's huge.
I think Chandler Rogers is the story of the Sun Belt right now. He's just one of these guys that seems to know how to come up with wins as a freshman. He's like one of those freshmen that are so naive and dumb coming into their program that they don't know that they're not supposed to be doing this well. He just seems to grab that team by the helmet, by the face mask, and said, "We're going to win some games." So, Warhawks. You know what? I'm calling it. Warhawks win.
Ooh, I like it. Red Wolves, Jags.
Yeah.
It's a 4-legged race. I'm sorry. I just don't see Arkansas State getting this win. Having seen South Alabama firsthand, they're good if they want to be, and I think that they're good enough this week to get the win.
It's going to be really hard to go up against that Bentley versus Tolbert combination, especially with the Red Wolves backfield that loves to give up big plays. Not very good at covering, but they did make Levi Lewis look really bad last week, which was quite entertaining on the Red Wolves side because we hadn't seen anybody look bad against that defense. So there is a sort of big positive wave going for the Red Wolves after that loss, which is a little sad for the program. What we call that, moral victories. We're not, nobody wants a moral victory.
FCS mentality.
It is. It's FCS mentality, and we're adopting it. But we feel this moral victory. We finally saw a defense that didn't give up 50 points. So we're kind of seeing where maybe some of this can go. I don't know if the Red Wolves beat the Jags. The Jags have a really good defense. I think they're the third best rushing defense or rush defense in all of the Sun Belt. We're not going to get the Red Wolves aren't going to get through that. Yes, I believe that the Jaguars at home win that game.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those things too, and I've said it several times. The Red Wolves seem allergic to defense at times, and that just isn't good with the amount of talent that Jalen Tolbert has, and Jake Bentley can throw it over the top. I know they're going to try to go long as much as they can. So look, a lot of those deep posts, a lot of those deep 9 routes for the really dorky, geeky guys like me who love play construction and things like that. I think you can hit Arkansas State deep. And certainly we should see an opportunity to do that.
I look to see Tolbert being the next Sun Belt player of the week. So that'll be fun. If anybody wants to tune in to watch that, check out Tolbert. He'll be great.
I'll definitely watch it. The nightcap. Good old-fashioned hate.
Oh, we don't have to cover this. Yeah, it's just some crap Sun Belt game. We don't have to talk about it.
I picked the Eagles, and here's why. Because Ben's ruined me. He constantly tells me,
he says,
don't bet on the Panthers. Don't pick the Panthers. Okay, fine. I'm not going to pick the Panthers. I pick the Eagles. And that's the sole reason why. Is because of Ben.
Yeah, you know what? That is actually not just the sole reason, but maybe a good reason not to, because I think he has like an insight as to what's going on with the Panthers, and he might know that something that he's not revealing, that maybe he's frightened of the Eagles, that maybe the Eagles are just too good, that they're secretly been lying in wait for this big Panthers game. I will say this: the Eagles are really tough at home, and I know this from personal experience, having seen my Red Wolves get completely destroyed by their run game. I feel like Georgia State might be a little too complete for this Georgia Southern team to compete. Georgia State can compete on defense. It can compete in the air game. It can compete on the ground game, as Ben will probably love to tell you after this. But the only thing that really gives either one of them an edge is hate. Who's going to hate each other more? And I think we'll see that on the field on Saturday.
If you got hate in your heart, let it out.
Yes, it's actually called modern day hate. Clean old fashioned hate is Georgia Tech. They've been playing quite a long time. So just to update that. But yeah, no, it's an enormous game. It's the most enormous game for both schools in the season. We know certainly what Georgia Southern has done this season. They've been easily the most disappointing program in the league. They were probably for most expected to be a bowl team. Now they would need a true miracle to make a bowl and pull off basically multiple wins. They still have Coastal on their schedule. They still have a game against App State, another one of their enormous rivals there. It's just looking like, playing out the string. Now, something that I will continue to say all week long and probably until Saturday night is weird things happen in rivalry games. Turnover early, things like that can happen. As you mentioned, both of these teams, they draw from Atlanta, both of their programs and their academic school. They draw from Metro Atlanta area. These kids know each other. There has already been some mouthiness and trash talking already from some of the Georgia Southern players yesterday. Happening from Georgia State's side of things for good reason. They know just how good they are on both sides of the football. They know how to defend one of the nation's worst offenses and also one of the nation's worst defenses against the pass. So for the Panthers getting loose, by the time this podcast actually will be posted, I'm sure the line will rise again. It was 6.5. It opened at 3. Now it's 6.5. I expect it to be closer to 10 by the time kickoff happens. There's just too many deficiencies on Georgia Southern side of things. They would need a tremendous lot of help, turnovers and things like that, which the Panthers really haven't done the last 3 weeks. And I think the Panthers roll, and I'm very interested to see this point as well. Head coach Sean Elliott is an App State man. We know the rivalry between App State and Georgia Southern. I asked him on Monday if he knew the record between him as a player, a coach, against Georgia Southern, and he said he didn't know it off the top of the head, but it was pretty good. With the amount of yapping that is going on out of Statesboro, I could absolutely see him rubbing it in Recruiting is another major factor in this state as well. Georgia Southern tries to recruit a lot of Metro Atlanta kids, as does Georgia State. This game matters in a big way. The one regret that I think I have for this game to be scheduled this weekend, it also is the same weekend as Georgia, Florida. So you take a lot of pullback from that. The weekend before Halloween always has a bye week with the University of Georgia taking that week off. I think it's one of those scenarios where if it would have been scheduled shout out Keith Gill. Let's talk about it. Call me. I'm available. We can talk about scheduling for next year to make this game the preeminent one in the state of Georgia. But I expect the Panthers to roll and definitely excited to see that with one eye there. And of course, one eye on the Braves in the World Series, which they are playing right now.
Parting shots, guys. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Hey, check out hellraiser.com. I have a preview of the Jags versus Red Wolves. I predicted defeat here on the podcast, but in my article, I predicted a win for the Red Wolves. So which Jeremy comes out on top? We don't know.
I love it. You got to find out. Big old teaser there, Jeremy. I will have to read.
You got to read it.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be cutting down modern day hate. Of course, the biggest game of the year for Georgia State and Georgia Southern. I have a piece in the hopper. We'll revisit a piece that I wrote back in 2014, talking specifically how both programs need each other. How it does benefit both to be in the same conference as of now, even though the gnashing of teeth that happened to both fan bases. And here's your stat of the day that I will stick the landing on. Since that first year where Georgia Southern won the league with Willie Fritz, they have 29 wins. Georgia State has 27. They're very evenly matched over this time since. And this is also the 8th matchup this weekend between the Panthers and the Eagles on the football field. And Georgia State is looking to take a commanding 5-3 lead.
Man, you could feel the heat of that hate coming through the video screen. Damn, Tibbs. Woo!
I don't think that's heat that you're fanning. Warhawk Report, as always, the information site for ULM athletics and as well as recruiting. My parting shot, guys, it's almost bowl season time. I unfortunately bought into the hype. I have a hotel room in Mobile where the Warhawks are scheduled to be in the LendingTree.com Bowl. When y'all's team makes it to Mobile, hit me up. I got a room for you.
Wow. You know what? You've become that guy. You've become the guy that is just quietly enjoying it almost in a smug way, this magic season of the Warhawks.
I'm just going back to my Boy Scout roots and being prepared.
Okay, well, you should be prepared. Yeah. You know what? We saw a lot of games in a lot of bowl games in Mobile back when the Red Wolves went 4 years in a row to the GoDaddy Bowl, and nobody, in my opinion, nobody does a smaller or what do you call it? Maybe a second tier. I hate saying that, bowl game quite like Mobile. They really do treat you like family. So I hope that the Warhawks make that bowl game. I hope that happens for you guys.
One last thing, another edition will be dropping tomorrow. When we're going to talk
2 days in a row.
New conference brothers. Heath Hinton from Big Gold Nation covering Southern Miss, and Tom Gregg with Herd Sports 24/7 joins us to talk Marshall. Marshall not official yet.
Yeah.
Southern Miss official today. All the pieces are falling in.
There's also rumors floating around, and these rumors are being spread by some big names in college football that maybe Old Dominion makes their announcement tomorrow. So that will be something that maybe we can officially talk about with Marshall and Southern Miss tomorrow.
Looking forward to it as always. This is Dusty Thibodeau, Warhawk Report. Jeremy Harper from hellraiser.com and Ben Moore, who has left us for the World Series with panthertalk.com. We'll talk to you next time on the FunBelt Podcast.
This is a PSA, or public sock announcement. Experts have declared Bombas socks as the best way to warm up chilly feet. These pairs are super cushioned, soft, and designed for maximum coziness. Plus, for every pair purchased, another pair will be donated, so someone in need of essential clothing can stay warm this winter. Go to bombas.com/listen and use code LISTEN for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/listen and use code LISTEN at checkout.